wish to comment on some very troubling aspects about the recent elections, both for the Lok Sabha and for the recently concluded Legislative Assembly elections in Haryana, Jharkhand, and Maharashtra. I will divide my remarks into two parts. The first is regarding the verification of EVMs and the Supreme Court judgment on 26th April. And the second are certain surprising facts regarding the election itself and especially the data regarding the elections. What we have seen both in the Lok Sabha and in the Legislative Assembly elections is the sudden jump in vote percentages uh, between the time the voting concludes and when the total sort of percentages are being announced. So, uh, so there are changes at different points in time. So a number is announced at say end of voting, roughly at the end of voting. Then another number is announced typically a few hours later. It varies from election to election depending on the time, but typically it's usually before midnight. And then a final number is usually announced, which is the total number of, and these are all percentages. The actual number of votes cast is never given by the ECI. And this has happened during all the elections. And the data is becoming more and more coarse. In the Haryana elections, for example, they didn't even announce it constituency-wise, they announced it district-wise, and so on. So, but there has been an increase in these numbers that have been announced. And the increases are not small. They are sort of unbelievably large. They range from 1 or 2% or less than 1% in some cases to double-digit figures, 12%, 12.5% in the case of the in Odisha, for example, during the general election, Lok Sabha election. And once again, now in Haryana and in Maharashtra, there have been huge jumps. For example, in the recently concluded Maharashtra election, the initial number jumped by approximately close to 7%, about 6.8%, at around 11:30 in the night on the day of voting, and then jumped by yet another percent, so reaching close to 8% uh, just before counting day. Now, how are these things happening? Because if the electronic voting and in this control unit, this counter has a certain value and it stops at that value once voting stops. There is absolutely no explanation from the ECI about why this is happening. Also, the ECI has continuously resisted giving out actual booth level data. Form 17C is available with all, I mean, Form 17C is actually filled in and submitted by all the presiding officers of each polling booth. And it would be a very simple task to make the presiding officers upload that data to the ECI website, a secure website. It need not be the public website, but a secure website from which the public can see what is happening in each booth. How many votes have been cast in each booth? So this level of granularity means that both candidates and the common citizen will know what is happening, how many votes have been cast in each booth. And when finally counting happens, they will know how many votes have been recovered from each booth. And there could be human errors in data entry and so on, but those can be easily reconciled because there's enough detail in all the forms that are submitted by the presiding officers to figure out why the error has happened. And each error can be resolved at the polling booth level. None of this is done by the ECI, and the reasons they give for not giving this data are just not believable. This level of transparency would easily, dispel any claims about manipulation and all that. But for some strange reason, The ECI systematically refuses to reveal data. Booth level data, if it is made public, lots of suspicions or lots of claims about manipulation and all that would go away if booth level data is released and people have a chance to see it and see how many votes have been cast and how many votes have been recovered when counting and so on and so forth. And there is no need also to do all this percentage business, because if the polling data is uploaded by the officer, by the presiding officers, the calculation of percentages, etc., is trivial. Since we have all the counts, the rest of it is trivial. And there's absolutely no reason why this data cannot be made public. At least to my mind, there's no reason. The other troubling factor, apart from these percentage increases, is the strange situation where actually at the end of the day, the votes cast as per the election commission and the votes counted seem to not match. And well, if they don't match in a few constituencies due to human error or something, it's understandable. But the number of mismatches is really huge. In the Lok Sabha election, for example, barring 3 constituencies, there was a mismatch in all other constituencies, and it's in both directions. So the votes cast can be more than the votes counted, and the votes counted can be more than the votes cast. Now, this is very strange. If the election, if EVMs, etc., are supposed to do things, without error or with very little error, this kind of this thing also needs explanation. So it's possible that the votes counted is kind of less than the votes cast, or rather is sometimes more than the votes cast. The reasons have to be given. There may be reasons why this happens. Maybe the mock poll which is done was not erased, and things like that can happen. But human errors are acceptable, but they can be fixed. But if there is no transparency, it leads to suspicion. So this is another big problem with the recently held elections. And because of the vote percentage difference in the first case, if you look at what certain public organizations, civil society organizations have brought out reports which shows that up to 79 seats in the Lok Sabha, had winning margins which were within the differences, the increase in percentages that were there, the increased percentage of votes that were there between first announcement and final announcement. Now, this is not acceptable. I mean, or rather, you have to justify it. I'm not saying that there has to be, it may happen. We can't see why it should happen, but even if it has happened, then you have to say why it has happened. And there is the ECI has not done anything to justify this. So these are rather troubling aspects, and the fact that the ECI just refuses to come out and be transparent and tell citizens and of course the candidates about this is very worrying. Also, definitely the system needs change. I mean, the EVM verification system needs change, and we should keep these electronic counts as backup and actually count the VVPATs, because the VVPATs are at least supposedly verified by the voter. The VVPAT slip is there for 7 seconds, and the voter is supposed to verify that the name and symbol of the candidate is proper. So the VVPAT slip is a record of, at least in principle, it's a record of the vote as it has been cast and as it has been registered. So why don't you count that vote? Because as I said, labile memories are present, and if they can be accessed in any possible way. They can be manipulated, and it will leave no trace. It's going to be almost impossible to detect this thing just by looking at the internals of the machine. Counting VVPAT slips would be a much more a simpler and a more cleaner approach to removing suspicions about this. So my recommendation is, at least to those candidates who want EVMs verified, is to at least do a sanity check and ask for count of the VVPAT slips, and then match it against whatever the electronic counts are.